I saw them before they saw me. Eli was sitting in the corner of the room, the warm yellow light hitting the face I used to know so well. But next to him was another woman. She leaned in close, whispering something. He laughed. That light laugh he used when he wanted to impress someone. The kind of laugh I hadn't heard directed at me or our daughter in a year. I held Mia's hand and walked in. She was clutching her little purple backpack, the bow crooked on one side because she had run too fast into the restaurant. She didn't see Eli first, but I did. When I got close to their table, Eli looked up. His eyes flickered for half a second, then settled into this strange calm. He spoke so quickly it felt rehearsed. This is a work partner. No blinking, no hesitation, no sign of a man lying to his wife and his daughter. I didn't react. I just looked straight at him. No words, no questions. Mia stood right against my leg, staring up at the three adults, confused about what was happening, and I let out a quiet breath. To understand this, I thought, we have to go back to when everything was still calm. Before everything slipped the way it has now, I still believed I knew my husband. I'm Tara. I'm not the kind of woman who talks much. I watch first, react later. I stay calm even when things go wrong. That's how I've lived for years. Eli, my husband, is the opposite. He's polite with strangers to the point everyone praises him. But at home, he shifts responsibility to others with that pleasant smile of his. He likes to look busy more than he likes to actually try. The only thing he's consistent about is keeping up the image of a good man in front of people who don't live with him. Mia, my daughter, is 7. She has eyes that notice changes fast. If I stay quiet too long, she'll step back and watch me carefully. She understands her mom's feelings before I say a word, but no matter how sensitive she is, I still wanted her to have a full, happy birthday. For Mia's birthday this year, Eli said he'd take care of everything. I didn't fully believe him, but I let him try for once. With Mia, anything can make her happy as long as both her parents are there. But Eli started forgetting even the smallest things. For Mia's birthday last year, he showed up almost an hour late and said there was traffic. For her school rehearsal, he said his boss called. For the end-of-year award ceremony, he texted at the last minute saying he'd try to make it. And he didn't. I'd gotten used to carrying everything on my own, from the smallest tasks to the biggest ones. But I wasn't used to watching Eli fade out piece by piece, even while he was still living in the same house. The small changes showed up before I realized they had already lined up into a pattern. Eli started placing his phone face down. He stopped leaving it charging on the kitchen counter and kept it with him at all times. Sometimes he'd smile at the screen to himself, but the moment I walked closer, he'd turn it off. I didn't ask anything. I didn't make a scene. I just took note of everything. A calm woman doesn't mean she doesn't see what's happening. The strange perfume showed up one night when Eli came home late. It wasn't an office scent, not food, not smoke. It was a sweet, seductive kind of perfume, sharper, more intentional. I stood next to him for only a few seconds, and I knew it wasn't accidental. The next day, Eli said something came up. I just nodded. I didn't ask what. The way he switched the subject so fast exposed the defensiveness he thought I couldn't see. One night, while Eli was asleep, his phone screen lit up. I didn't touch it. I never have. But what caught my attention was the name on the notification, Celine. A name I'd never heard. The message read, "Are you still awake?" No emoji, no extra punctuation, but the tone was more intimate than anything Eli had texted me in years. I looked at the screen for 1 second, then looked at Eli. He was sleeping peacefully. His breathing was steady, as if he was sure his wife would never question him. I didn't unlock the phone. I just kept that name in my mind. For a long time. Celine showed up a few more times after that, flashing on the screen before disappearing. He changed his password. He even changed where he kept his phone. He started saying things like, You're too sensitive. You're overthinking. Don't try to control me. I wasn't controlling him. I was just watching from a distance as the man I once thought was mature turned into someone afraid of a simple question. The only thing I did was stay quiet. I stayed quiet long enough that Eli thought I didn't notice anything changing. But Mia noticed. She asked me once, "Does Dad not like me anymore, Mom?" I pulled her into my arms and just said, "It's not your fault." In the weeks that followed, Eli drifted even farther away. No more evenings watching Mia color. No more small stories from his day. He always had to go. Always had a call. Always had extra work. It was as if our family was just another appointment he was ready to cancel at any moment. I started to accept a hard truth. Eli had left this family long before the night I saw him sitting with Celine at the restaurant on Mia's birthday. The moment I walked into that place, the moment he looked at me and lied without even taking a breath. That wasn't the beginning. It was just the first time the truth stood in the light with nowhere left to hide. I looked at Eli for one more second in that fancy dining room. 1 second was enough to know our marriage had been cracking from the smallest details he thought I never noticed. And when I turned away and took Mia's hand, I knew. I didn't need to do anything. He had already walked away from us long before I realized it. After that night at the restaurant, I didn't ask Eli a single question. I didn't bring up seeing him with Celine. I didn't ask how he could look me in the eye and lie as easily as breathing. But my silence didn't make him reflect on anything. It only made him more comfortable pulling away from his family. In the days that followed, Eli started missing everything that mattered to Mia. For the performance she had practiced for a month, he texted at the last minute, "I have an unexpected meeting." That meeting lasted until midnight. A week later, Mia had a reading program at school. Eli said he'd be there, then didn't show up. His excuses were always the same: bland, vague, weightless. And when I said just one sentence, "You should tell us earlier so she doesn't wait," Eli pushed back immediately. "You're too demanding. Can't I have my own life?" As if being a father was something he was being forced into, not something he once said he was proud of. The nights Eli came home late started increasing too. His phone would ring, and he'd step outside to answer it. I didn't even have the chance to say anything before he pushed me into the wrong corner. "You're overthinking. Don't blow things out of proportion." Light gaslighting, familiar, like he'd memorized those lines from someone else. What caught my attention wasn't the words. It was his eyes every time he said, "You're too sensitive." They didn't look like Eli's anymore. They looked like someone repeating another person's script. The name Celine first came out of Eli's own mouth on what should have been a quiet night. He came home early, surprisingly cheerful. He talked about work, then mentioned a consultant on his team. He said, "Celine helps me sort things out. She gets me." His voice lifted when he said her name, lifted in a way I hadn't heard from him in a long time. It was like someone had handed him a brand new version of himself, and he believed in that version more than he believed in who he used to be. I didn't react. I just listened. And in that calm, I knew something was starting to show. That night, while Eli was in the shower, his phone lit up over and over. I didn't touch it, but the lock screen previews didn't need a password. "Don't let her make you feel guilty. You don't owe anyone anything." Messages written like someone trying to erase my place in Eli's life. That tone wasn't from someone who was just consulting. It was from someone trying to step into a spot that wasn't hers. I quietly started looking into who Celine was, not out of jealousy. I just wanted to know who was influencing my family. On social media, she had this polished, sugary persona. Sweet captions, photos with eyes posed to draw men in. But in the comments, a lot of women mentioned her name in ways that weren't pleasant at all. Someone wrote, "She likes getting between other people's families." Another said, "Don't let the sweetness fool you. She's good at twisting a man's mind." I had never met Celine before the night at the restaurant, but the more I read, the clearer her type became. Sweet to men, sharp to women, the kind who uses soft words to slip into marriages already loosening at the edges. Some of her posts hinted at men whose hearts were hurt by their wives. There was another one. Not every third woman is wrong. Sometimes the first woman doesn't know how to keep him. To me, everything was clear without needing more digging. And from then on, every small thing Eli did showed her influence more plainly. One night, around 3 a.m, Eli's phone buzzed. He shot up like a reflex. He didn't look at me, didn't look around. He just grabbed his phone and walked straight into his office. The door closed softly, but I could hear his voice inside, low and tense. That whisper wasn't a voice he had ever used for me. One afternoon, when I reminded Eli that Mia wanted him to take her to art class, he looked at me with irritation. "Don't control me like that." That wasn't Eli's line. I'd seen the exact same sentence in one of Celine's posts a few days earlier. He started treating me as if I were the one stopping him from finding himself. But the truth was, he was just living by the script of a woman who had nothing to do with this family. I watched Eli drift farther and farther, slipping out of who he used to be. No warmth left, no trace of the way he used to smile when Mia told him stories from school. He looked like a man trying to run from his own life and step into one someone else had built for him. I didn't interfere. I didn't ask who Celine was. I didn't make Eli explain anything. I just watched, and in that watching, I realized something very clear. Eli wasn't Eli anymore. But more importantly, I no longer held on to him the way I used to. I no longer felt the urge to pull back someone who had already let go. One late night, after Mia had fallen asleep, Eli said he needed space to breathe. I looked at him. There was something in his eyes for a moment, a bit of guilt, a bit of confusion, but it disappeared the second his phone lit up with Celine's name. He stared at the screen longer than he needed to. I watched him turn away to answer her, and I knew this house was no longer a place he wanted to return to. I went into Mia's room. She was curled up under her blanket, hugging the little bear with one torn ear. I brushed her hair and thought, a family is never broken by a third person. It only breaks when someone on the inside opens the door for them. And Eli had opened that door, wide, without a hint of hesitation. When I lay down next to Mia, I knew the hardest part was already over. Not the betrayal. The moment I stopped expecting anything. I understood that from the second I saw Celine's name on Eli's phone, everything had already started slipping, but seeing them in that restaurant sharing the smile he once saved for me made something even clearer. Celine was trying to break my family, and Eli was walking straight into her trap with his eyes wide open, thinking he was being wise. I didn't need to fight for him. People like Celine always reveal who they really are. And people like Eli easily led by sweet words, always pay the price once there's no one left standing beside them. After weeks of watching Eli slip further from our family, I knew the moment of truth would come. I just didn't expect it to land right on Mia's birthday. But real life doesn't wait for the right timing. It exposes exactly what someone's been trying hardest to hide. That evening, Mia was practically bouncing as we walked into the restaurant. She held my hand tight, her eyes lighting up at the warm yellow lights and the cakes in the display case. "Mom, can Dad take a picture of me later?" I nodded, even though I knew Eli probably wouldn't follow through. Still, I wanted to give her at least one moment that didn't break. I picked a table by the window. I was opening my phone to ask a staff member to take a picture of the three of us when Eli arrived. Mia was practicing her smile in a little mirror. But then, when I turned to call a waiter, I saw Eli first. Not at the entrance like I expected. Not alone. Not hurrying toward his daughter like a dad who's late. He was sitting in the corner of the restaurant, leaning in close to Celine. The space between them was so close I thought Eli was whispering into her ear. Celine laughed softly, placing her hand on his collar like it was something she did every day. Eli didn't move her hand away. He didn't lean back. He didn't even flinch when I saw them. I stood still for a few seconds, not because I was shocked. I had known this for a long time. It was just that today, instead of clues, the truth was sitting in plain sight under the same warm light on their table. Mia tugged on my sleeve. "Mom, where's Dad?" I placed my hand on her head and kept my voice steady. "Come with me." I walked her toward Eli's table. They noticed me when I was only a few steps away. Eli froze for half a second. That half second was the only moment he lost control. Then he slipped back into his usual calm, as if he were switching roles from the man cheating to the innocent man being misunderstood. Smooth, clean, almost flawless. "This is a work partner," Eli said immediately. No blinking, no change in tone. If I hadn't known the truth, I might have believed him. He said that sentence with the confidence of someone who thought he was smarter than everyone else. Celine looked at me. That look wasn't surprise. It was the look of someone already prepared to face the wife of the man she'd been trying to pull away. No avoidance, no shame, no fake innocence. It was a kind of bold confidence, like she believed she'd already won long before I walked over. Then she turned to Eli and said, her voice soft as a breeze, "Baby, I think—" She didn't finish the sentence, but that was more than enough. Anyone walking by could hear it. That way of addressing him could never belong to a work partner. Eli flinched a little at the word, but he didn't deny it. That was when I knew he wasn't trying to hold both sides anymore. He'd already chosen. I didn't need to ask which. I only had to look. I didn't look at Celine for long. Women like her live off the reactions of others. I wasn't giving her that. I looked at Eli, cold, quiet, no blame, no questions. And I said just one sentence. "You don't have to make up a story. I know exactly who you chose." My voice was low and steady enough that no one at the table could guess what I was thinking. But I saw Eli freeze. Celine too. Not because what I said was sharp or cruel, but because I said it like this whole thing had ended a long time ago. People at the next table started glancing over. No noise, no whispering, just a few witnessing looks. But that alone was enough to shake the little control Eli had left. He wasn't used to being seen like this, especially in a moment where he wasn't the polite man he'd worked so hard to pretend to be. I felt a brief flicker of confusion from him as he tried to open his mouth, ready to say something to fix the situation. But Celine placed her hand on his arm, a gesture with a very clear message. Don't explain. Don't soften. Don't let your wife take back control. I gave a small smile, not mocking, just a simple acknowledgement. Ah, everything's clear now. I turned to Mia. She was looking at me with wide, confused eyes. She didn't understand the whole situation, but she could feel the cold in the air. I knelt down so we were eye level. "Sweetheart, let's go. We'll eat somewhere else." Mia nodded. She didn't ask why her dad wasn't coming with us. Kids are more perceptive than adults think. I stood up, adjusted her shirt, and took her hand. No crying, no shaking, no more words for Eli. I walked with Mia straight toward the door while Eli watched us leave but didn't stand up. He just sat there, caught between two directions, me and Celine. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The moment I stepped out of the restaurant, I knew I had just done something Celine could never do. I left Eli for her. No fighting, no clinging, no trying to save someone who had already chosen to walk away. That was the first reversal. Not because I exposed them in public, not because I forced Eli to confess, but because I stepped back at the exact moment they least expected it, with a calm they didn't know how to handle. Celine wanted to tear my family apart. I let her see what she could actually do with the man she thought was her greatest victory. That night, When I opened the car door and Mia climbed into the back seat, I felt strangely light. Not because I lost a husband, but because I finally let go of a man who had left me long before. After the night I took Mia out of that restaurant, Eli didn't text, didn't call, didn't ask where we went. He let the silence stretch, as if silence could fix everything. I knew the moment I walked away, Eli thought he'd won. He thought I'd get jealous, ask questions, try to pull him back. But I didn't say a word, not a single message, not one line of blame. In the days that followed, I stayed completely silent. I didn't ask where he went, didn't care what time he came home, didn't check what he posted or who he was with. Eli must have noticed the shift, but instead of worrying, he looked relieved, like someone finally freed from a burden he invented himself. He came home less. Some nights, not at all. Some nights, he sent a single line, "I'm staying at work tonight." I read the message and set my phone down. No reply. I wasn't saving something someone else had already thrown away. Celine seemed delighted with the distance between us. She started posting more often, her tone dripping with insinuation. Finally found the right person. Not everyone deserves his kindness. And the one that stood out the most? Some people are good at keeping the ring, not the heart. Eli interacted with those posts, not publicly, but each quiet like left a trace. His behavior made one thing obvious. Eli looked like someone who'd been rewired. He believed he was stepping into something called new love, instead of seeing he was being led around like a man without a compass. I didn't explain to Mia what was happening. I just kept her routine steady. Dinner on time, reading, early bedtime. But she felt the growing distance. Many nights she asked, "Is Dad eating with us, Mom?" I said, "No, he's busy today." Nothing more. I didn't want to turn Eli into the bad guy in her eyes. He was doing that on his own. As Eli became more and more absent, I started preparing to leave. Not to run away, but to end a marriage where only one person was still standing in it. I gathered documents, Mia's birth certificate, medical records, some financial papers. I packed clothes, folded them neatly into a small suitcase. Every step slow and deliberate. No rush, no unnecessary emotion. I found a new place a few blocks away, close enough that Mia wouldn't be uprooted, far enough that Eli would understand he'd lost something he couldn't easily get back. I didn't tell him. No warning, no deadline. I just moved, quietly, the same way he had quietly erased himself from our family. One afternoon, when Eli texted that he'd be home late, I just looked at the screen and set the phone down. I walked into the bedroom and took one last look around. Not a single memory rose up to make me want to stay. I wrote a small note, folded it, and left it on the kitchen counter. "You're free. I don't want to stand beside you anymore." No blame, no questions, no pleading, just a final line. Cold and true. Mia and I left that house as if we were just stepping out to buy a few things, but inside I knew I wasn't coming back. The door closed behind me without a second of hesitation. In the first few weeks, Eli didn't look for me. Of course he didn't. He was busy enjoying his freedom. The freedom he and Celine both thought was some kind of blessing. Eli posted photos eating out in different places. And Celine wrote things like, "Finally living how I really feel. No longer held back by anyone." I glanced at them, then scrolled on. None of that had anything to do with me anymore. Eli believed he and Celine were the right people at the right time. He believed I was the problem. Believed he had stepped into a better version of his life. I didn't correct him. A man has to learn his own lessons, and I wasn't his teacher. But like every relationship built on betrayal, the cracks showed fast. One night, Eli FaceTimed Mia, the first time he'd reached out on his own. But as soon as Mia picked up the phone, I heard Celine's voice behind him, sharp and irritated. "Can you hang up? I'm talking to you." Eli rushed to cover the camera. Then the call ended abruptly. Another day, he called again. This time, it wasn't a glitch. It was a real fight. I heard Celine's voice raised. If you still care that much about your old family, then why are you with me? Eli answered so quietly, I had to focus to hear, Mia is still my daughter. Celine snapped. That's exactly why I can't trust you. Those words made me realize something. Celine didn't want a man with a sense of responsibility. She wanted a man who belonged only to her. Eli started going silent during their arguments. Not the same silence he used on me. This was the silence of someone who knew he'd made the wrong choice but didn't know how to step back. As time went on, their fights became clearer. Celine got jealous when Eli texted Mia. Celine wanted him to block my number, even though I had never bothered him. She wanted to control every step he took, every word he said. Eli started getting tired. He was exhausted at work and even more exhausted at home. But he didn't dare tell Celine the truth. He'd built the image of the strong man who left his old marriage for so long that he couldn't admit he was the one being controlled now. Things started to crack, but they didn't break. Not yet. It was just the first shake enough for me to know what I'd been waiting for was finally on its way. They were stepping into their first real cycle of fights. Not destroyed, but tilted. And most importantly, I wasn't the one touching any of it. They were doing it to each other. The cracks between Eli and Celine didn't stop at a few small arguments. They grew day by day, as if the two of them were never actually compatible, only aligned because they stood on the same side while pushing against my existence. Once I stepped out of the picture, they had nothing left to lean on, and every weakness between them showed itself bare. The breaking point hit on a weekend night. Eli wanted to FaceTime Mia. He genuinely missed her, even if he wouldn't admit that to Celine, but this time, she was standing right behind him when he dialed. Celine saw Mia's name pop up on the screen, and she exploded. Can you cut contact with that kid? Her voice was sharp, raised, stripped of the sweetness she once used to lure Eli in. Eli turned around, panic all over his face. She's my daughter. Celine let out a short, mocking laugh. And I don't want a man who keeps clinging to his old family. Either you choose me, or you go back to them. Eli had never been forced into such a blunt choice before. He froze. He couldn't say yes, and he couldn't say no. I didn't hear the rest of that fight, but the next morning Mia told me her dad called again, sounding sad. That was enough for me to know their confrontation had blown up bigger than any fight they'd had before. The following day, Eli's neighbor, now my former neighbor, messaged me, saying she heard shouting from his apartment. Celine was yelling words like, weak, useless, not worth what I'm giving up. Those words were Celine's true nature. She was good at breaking things, not building them. Good at making promises from the outside, but unable to handle the reality that never matched what she imagined. And for the first time, Eli finally saw it clearly. He didn't yell back. He didn't defend himself. He just went silent. The kind of hopeless silence someone has when they realize they've gone too far in the wrong direction and don't know how to turn around. 2 days later, Celine left as quickly as she had appeared. No warning, no explanation, no attempt to stay. She left Eli with the messy apartment, a few scattered clothes, a heavy scent of perfume lingering in the air, and the truth that she never loved him. She only needed the feeling of winning. And when the game ended, she moved on to her next target, like someone swapping out an old shirt. Eli called Mia that night. His voice was low, rough, enough for me to know he hadn't slept. I stood a few steps behind Mia, watching his face on the screen. That wasn't the man who'd confidently chased freedom. It was a man who had lost everything and knew exactly whose fault it was. For the first time since I left, Eli looked straight into the screen and said, "Can I talk to your mom?" I stepped forward, calm. "What do you need?" Eli exhaled hard, like he was swallowing all his shame. Tara, I want to talk about everything. I know I was wrong. I know I missed. He paused, struggling to find words for something he couldn't name. I want to fix it. I looked at him for a few seconds, not angry, not pleased, just looking at a man who realized the truth far too late. Eli continued, his voice breaking. Give me a chance. Just one. I didn't answer right away. I looked at Mia. She was sitting on the chair, legs swinging gently, listening but not understanding everything. I turned back to Eli. His eyes were the eyes of someone drowning, reaching for anything that might keep him above water. I said one sentence. I'm not going back to the place I had to leave just to save myself. My voice wasn't loud, wasn't harsh, wasn't bitter. It was just honest. And that honesty was enough to close the door Eli was trying to reopen. Eli went completely silent. He blinked for the first time since the call started. I knew he understood. There was no way back. No explanation big enough to undo the choices he'd made. I looked at him one last time, then handed the phone to Mia so she could say goodbye. She said a few short things, then closed the call. No tears from me, no accusations. I didn't hate Eli. I just didn't have space for him in the life I was rebuilding with my own peace. A week later, Eli showed up outside my new apartment. He didn't knock. He just stood there as Mia and I walked out for school. He looked at us like someone who lost something he'd never get back. Tara, I just shook my head, not because I hated him, but because I didn't owe him another conversation. I took Mia's hand. She looked up at me, then at Eli. She didn't run to hug him like she used to. She just held my hand tighter. I started walking. I didn't look back. Eli stood there, alone in the pale morning light, like a man who finally realized everything had slipped out of his hands long ago. But he'd been too busy chasing an illusion to notice until every door was already closed. There was no going back, no forgiveness, no starting over. Some things, once they break, keep the shape of the damage, and there's no way to put them back together without leaving a crack. Eli traded his family for the feeling of being admired. He abandoned his wife for the sweet words of someone who never planned to stay. He walked away from his daughter to chase something built on lies. And then he lost everything. I wasn't the one who made that happen. They did it to each other. In the end, Mia and I walked forward together, and Eli was left with one simple, painful truth. He realized everything far too late, at the exact moment I was no longer in the place he thought he could return to. The story ends here. Thank you for listening. See you next time.